Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Cold, hard cash.
Financial incentives are one part of the package of solutions, but you have to think about non-financial incentives.
With a nursing shortage in the thousands, the province is going to new heights to draw staff to remote parts of BC. Plus, desperate times, desperate measures.
It's almost a full-time job looking for a place. I've been pretty stressed and worried.
The extremes would-be renters are going to in search of a place they can afford to live. Also, it's that time of year.
I'm all sniffly today.
Itchy eye and it hurts.
It's definitely picked up in the last week or two.
The early spring weather means an early start to allergy season as well.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. It is a big offer to nurses. Move to a remote part of BC and make some big cash. The province said as of April 1st, signing bonuses will bring much needed help to the struggling healthcare sector in rural areas in particular. But as Belle Puri reports, critics say it's going to take more than just money to fix the crisis.
Big skies and sprawling vistas. BC's Northwest is remote and rural. In healthcare, that's a challenge.
Not only are we having to try and keep things safe, sometimes things get a little bit hairy.
Christina Rogers is a nurse in Terrace, where staff shortages are a constant problem.
You are a general, so you're not only just taking care of one area of your specialty, you are doing everything. I think everybody deserves an incentive to go work in a place that's lacking.
Starting April 1st, the BC government will offer perks, as much as $30,000 for nurses who agree to work 2 years in the north and as much as $20,000 in other remote areas. The province hopes that the incentives will boost recruiting efforts outside of metropolitan areas. The bonuses are a one-time offer. In nursing schools, the number of students interested in rural work is no more than a handful. Instructors say incentives have to be more than money.
Most of the nurses who work in rural actually are within 1 to 4 years of graduating. So they are very new nurses. They need support. But I think we need a nursing virtual support that can then also, they can talk to a nurse who's, doing this on a regular basis. So how do I do this? And being there when they need them for however long they need them.
Incentives are nothing new. In the early 1990s, BC nurses were being recruited by the United States.
They were even offering you a car and a 1-year mortgage on a house to go to the U.S.
For some, financial incentives are only a Band-Aid solution.
Is it just whitewashing the problems and just saying that we're doing something?
This public policy expert says rural recruitment of nurses is an international problem.
What the BC government is doing in offering incentives for nurses to live and work in those locations is absolutely in line with what governments around the world have done.
In Terrace, Christina Rogers is from here, trained here, and has worked here for 6 years.
At, say, 30 grand for someone to come here, that is a great start for them. As a person who has been here working the whole time and watching people coming and going and still always suffering with short staffing, I would love an incentive to stay.
It's estimated across the province, BC is short 6,000 nurses. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Vancouver police are putting out a public warning after a woman was attacked by a stranger in Stanley Park. It happened yesterday morning. The woman in her 50s was on Lee's Trail just north of Lost Lagoon when she was sexually assaulted by a man. Officers say they conducted extensive searches of the park but were not able to find him. They've got extra patrols out today, including on the trails.
To have a violent crime occur in Stanley Park in the middle of the day is frightening and concerning for a lot of people. We want people to know that we're taking this very seriously. We're doing everything that we can to investigate, but also to provide some reassurance to the public. And part of that is increasing our police presence there.
The suspect is described as a dark-skinned man in his 20s, about 5'7". He was wearing a zip-up jacket with a checkered pattern on the front. Anyone with information that could help in this investigation is asked to contact police. Nearly $300,000 in contraband has been discovered and seized at Mission Correctional Center. The haul included 2 smartphones plus accessories, along with methamphetamine and other drugs. Correctional Service Canada says they use a number of tools, including ion scanners and drug detecting dogs, to prevent these kinds of things from happening. The institution says police are investigating why those tools didn't do the job this time. A minor league hockey player has been suspended for his role in an altercation that left the other team's goalie unresponsive on the ice. In late January, Richmond Sockeyes defenseman Ethan Grisham was involved in a fight. Video shows him with his arms around the goaltender's upper body for roughly 20 seconds. When Grisham let go, the other player slumped down onto the ice. The goalie has since been medically cleared to play, and Grisham has been suspended by the league for 31 games. Well, rent and mortgage interest costs are primary drivers of Canada's inflation. Here in BC, renters face the highest rates in the country. And for some, the hunt for a place to live has turned into a second job. Our Yvette Brent has that story.
In this freezer, I believe we have 7 or 6 of them now.
Hudson and Jackson Forsyth Beck sold pickles and produce they grew in the front yard of the rental home that they're now about to lose. Their family has been evicted.
We eventually had a flow of customers, and they just kept coming and coming. We just got bigger and bigger.
If anybody has any solutions.
Their dad posted a video begging for freezer space to save all this food while he hunts for a new family home.
It's almost a full-time job looking for a place. We don't have the room to store it. What are we going to do?
Dozens of applications later, he's left in line with 100 others to pay double or triple his current rent.
I've been pretty stressed and worried.
Housing experts say this family isn't alone. In the past 2 years in Canada, rent rose an average of $384 a month. Metro Vancouver had the country's highest average monthly rent for a one-bedroom in February at $2,653.
It breaks my heart to hear, I have to advertise to see if someone will welcome me into their rental and let me pay an exorbitant amount of money for a one-bedroom. A younger demographic is working hard, and their hard work isn't paying off like it used to.
People desperate to find rentals are posting pleas.
You need to stand out of the crowd. I just want to try different ways to get attraction, like a spotlight on us.
It starts to make a lot of
Skyrocketing rental rates don't help.
The competition is stiff. There's a lot of competition.
The irony isn't lost on this custom home builder that he's creating homes and can't even find a rental he can afford.
Sometimes I struggle with what I'm doing for work. Am I part of the problem or am I part of the solution? But, you have to make money to survive.
A moment of peace before it's back to the grind of finding shelter. Yvette Brent, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, BC's Auditor General says 2 of the province's harm reduction programs have fallen short and need to be revamped. Michael Pickup says the overdose prevention program has not been sufficient regarding site selection, staffing, and service standards. And he says the Safer Supply program lacks collaboration between stakeholders, public reporting, and limits of available drugs.
His advice is welcome to us in terms of any way we can improve the program, ensure that we're providing information to the public about why we're doing this, and to depoliticize the effort to save lives.
The Auditor General's report includes recommendations for improving both systems, which the province says it will implement. Parks Canada has updated its plan to combat whirling prevention disease, a disease that's very difficult to eradicate. The disease affects fish. It has a 90% mortality rate in fry and is incurable. To curb the risk of further spread, all bodies of water in Yoho and Kootenay National Parks are closed to watercraft and angling until March 25th of next year. Those who don't abide by the closure could face steep fines.
Our aquatic invasive species teams will have staff that will be out on the landscape checking compliance with these new measures. And if there are any convictions, there is a possibility of a fine of up to $25,000 under the Canada National Parks Act.
Watercraft can pick up sediment, plant fragments, and mud and then transfer the disease between lakes. Those closures are meant to help protect several trout species and kokanee salmon. Parks Canada says it will continue to conduct sampling and monitoring. Well, this week's warm weather has flowers blooming, sunbathers basking, and allergy sufferers sneezing. Our Zara Premji now with some advice on how to combat this year's early arrival of allergy season.
That's an all too familiar allergy season sound that's been ringing through Metro Vancouver a little bit early this year.
I just sneeze.
Kind of itchy eyes, sneezing, lots of sneezing, hey?
Itchy eye and it hurts.
I'm all sniffly today, and I blow my nose many, many times this morning.
Well, sniffly.
For Sherry Young, it's all about how she gears up for the allergy season, early or not.
I mean, it's really annoying, but I guess it's like inevitable, so it kind of just, happens. But like reacting, my best friend, I love that so much.
And the facts back Sherry up. The season has arrived early, according to aerobiology research labs that have been monitoring pollen in Canada for 30 years. The group has a monitoring station in Vancouver that shows this year did see an early start to the season with pollen in the air in late January, and 39 times more pollen circulating right now than this time last year.
It's definitely picked up in the last week or two, just with the warming weather and a lot higher pollen count being outside, and so you're getting a lot more people coming in and questioning or asking about certain allergy products that they might want to use.
Pharmacists say if you're looking for a solution, there are many ways to tackle this pollen push.
Keep all the windows and doors closed. Whenever you get home, it's usually a good idea to kind of change clothes, have a shower, get all that pollen off you.
And your local pharmacist can now guide you through allergies and even prescribe for them. But if that's not enough, some of the British Columbians facing it firsthand share their tricks.
My mom, she gets a warm towel and puts it on my face.
I get out early and I walk before everything kind of gets stirred up.
I think just drink a lot of water and don't go outdoor when the cherry blossoms are going.
If you're going to a picnic or something, maybe bring a towel so you're not just sitting on the grass.
But there's consensus among many of these allergy sufferers.
Or the rest of the country's still under snow, right? So we're lucky to have the cherry blossoms and everything going. That it's part of being a Vancouverite and living in Vancouver.
It is a beautiful place to live in. Love the trees, the nature's so pretty. So I guess also I do really agree with that because it's it is really beautiful. So I love the place I live.
And it's not all sneezing and irritated eyes. For the allergy prone, there could be some reprieve in sight. The experts at the aerobiology research lab say this next week in Vancouver will see pollen dropping from very high to just high until the weekend, where it's expected to drop to moderate when the weather cools off again. But the pollen is here to stay for the season. So as the allergy prone say, stay inside or go forth armed with tissues. Zara Premji, CBC News, Vancouver.
Darius Madavi is here now with a look at the first weather forecast. And Darius, speaking of allergy season, I see we were both inspired by the cherry blossoms in picking our wardrobe today. So well done.
Thank you. Yes.
But first, it's Persian New Year as well. So Nowruz, or as some say, Navroz Mubarak.
Thank you. You too. Yes, it is the spring equinox, and that, by definition, is also Nowruz. And so it is the Persian New Year. And the reason it is the spring equinox is because this is the time of year when the Earth is in the perfect position in its orbit to see the equator get a direct blast of sunlight. And so as the Earth orbits the sun, it moves from different places. And because the Earth's orbit is tilted, which is why we get seasons at all, when the northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun, we get summer. When it's tilted away from the sun, we get winter. But during the equinox, the Earth is in its time, in its orbit, where the tilt of the Earth doesn't affect how much light we're getting at all. So it's almost a perfect 12-hour day, 12-hour night, no matter where you are in the world. And that's also defined as the exact moment the sun is directly over the equator. So today, that's at this year, it's at 8:06 p.m. today here in the Pacific time. If you are in Mountain time, that is 1 hour later, 9:06. But regardless, that is the technical definition of when we see the equinox. And that also, you can see here, this is satellite imagery actually from NASA. This, when it's perfectly lined up, is the equinox because you can see that shadow ending up where we see exactly the tilt of the Earth not affecting how much sunlight we are getting. So very cool stuff. As you said, it's also Nowruz, which is the Persian New Year. You usually have a half scene, which means 7 and S. Scene is the Persian letter, which is roughly equivalent to S. And so you have 7 items on the table that all start with the letter S, all representing different parts of the theme of renewal and rebirth and of the new year. So very exciting stuff. Now, what are we looking at for this new year? No matter where you are in the province, it is looking like we're going to see that cloud building in, those temperatures starting to drop, and a little bit of precipitation on the way. So not the most springy forecast, but the sun is mostly in our rear view now, Tanya.
We've certainly got a lot of it. We can't complain. Thanks so much, Darius.
Thank you.
A sad note to pass along now. BC has lost a local news legend. Longtime radio reporter George Garrett has died. He worked at CKNW for 43 years, breaking countless stories, and was one of the first reporters on the scene of the deadly collapse of the Second Narrows Bridge in 1958.
And I think I was the only reporter in town, and don't say that immodestly, but they trust me to tell me something and to not give them away. So I'm probably one of the few reporters who would be able to tell the story of the rank and file members of the department.
Garrett was a mentor to many journalists in BC. A scholarship was set up in his name for aspiring reporters. George Garrett had cancer and died peacefully in his hospice in Surrey last night. He was 89 years old. Well, still ahead, it's spring break, meaning travel for some families, but with hotels, flights, activities, those costs can add up quickly. After the break, we'll look at how to get away without breaking the bank. And thank you for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Well, BC certainly isn't the only province short on family doctors. In Quebec, physicians are speaking out against the amount of time they have to spend doing insurance paperwork. As the CBC's Paula Deanne-Perez reports, doctors say that's precious time they should be spending with patients instead.
Piles and piles of paperwork. Quebec doctors say hundreds of patients visit them a week, not for immediate medical care, but to get referrals and fill out insurance forms.
This general concept of documentation and the time that it takes to do it is overwhelming in healthcare. It's overwhelming. It's burning people out.
Doctors say the variety of forms makes paperwork even more time-consuming. There's government forms, and there are also private insurance companies that request a doctor's reference before it can cover the cost of paramedical care, like massage therapy.
Something that is part of their collective insurance that they pay for, but that some insurance company do ask providers to provide a medical reason on why they should benefit from that service they pay for.
The association representing all private insurance companies across the country says they advise group insurance plans not to require a doctor's note for paramedical services. The president of the association says most of the time companies do follow their recommendations, but sometimes employers or unions use reference requirements as a way to control costs.
So for instance, if you need a reference to cover the cost of a massotherapist, you might not go as frequently as you would without the references.
The association says one of the ways it's helping to relieve the pressure on doctors is by standardizing forms for all private insurance companies. Now it's up to the province to make them more easily available electronically. The health minister says there's new funding in the budget for that.
Moi, je me donne quelques mois pour être capable de faire ça, là. Pas plus long que ça. Et c'est pour ça que je t'ai encouragé, c'est de dire maintenant on a l'argent pour faire le virage numérique. C'est ça que le ministre Girard nous a donné cette semaine.
In a statement, the health ministry says it's already cut down on follow-up appointments when it comes to public insurance. It also says it has removed a previously required form. The province says it's a first step. Paula Deanne-Perez, CBC News, Montreal.
Well, spring break is here for many British Columbians, and some are still thinking about getting away. But with everything costing a little bit more these days, the price of flights and hotels can add up pretty quickly. So joining me to talk about saving some money while traveling is money coach and podcaster Farah Turkot. Farah, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So first off, where do you recommend people go if they are on a budget? Presumably that would mean maybe domestically within Canada or even within BC, but are there any international travel deals out there right now?
Absolutely. What's great about looking internationally is that Canadian dollar can go a lot further for you when you're traveling. So I really recommend looking at places like YVR Deals, which is a Facebook group.
Love that group. I'm on it.
They send you email notifications. One that popped up for me today is actually going to Bangkok, Thailand for under $1,000 round trip. So definitely one of those to check out as well, and lots of Aeroplan rewards deals going on right now.
Okay, good to know it's not too late.
No.
Some airlines we know have hiked the prices when we talk about checked baggage fees. It seems like everything now, the base airfare is cheap, but all of those add-ons add up quite quickly. How do you save on those in-transit costs? Do you have any tips on that?
Well, there are a lot of credit cards, also travel credit cards that actually cover the cost of checked baggage, which is great. So definitely look into those. And also some budget airlines as well are even charging for carry-on. So make sure you're reading the fine print before you're booking those flights, because that could add up very quickly for a large group or family. And so make sure you get those credit cards that have those ability to cover the cost of baggage, and pack light, roll everything you can up and travel light for sure.
Carry-ons are our friends. I've learned that much.
Yes.
Choosing accommodation can be a struggle, and I know you talked about traveling in large groups if you've got a big family or going with friends. What should people look for when you are traveling with a group?
Well, starting off, definitely setting expectations from the get-go. Everyone should be as honest and transparent as they can about what their expectations are, what their budgets are, what they are expecting. And when traveling together as a group, sometimes it's actually great to book directly with the hotel you plan on staying at. Sometimes they have promotions or discounts that aren't offered through travel websites like Expedia, for example. And also looking for accommodation that may have kitchenettes, kitchens. That way you could save costs on groceries together, and making sure that we're having a travel sinking fund prepared ahead of time so that we can allocate funds on an ongoing basis, as opposed to worrying about the costs right up until the point of the trip when you're scrambling and then you're panicking. Where is the money going to come from right before? So start early.
Yeah, especially when there are a lot of people involved, the sooner the better. Yes. Dining out, of course, this can be one of the biggest costs. You get there and you're all excited to try some local cuisine, but how do you recommend saving money on meals?
Well, I think one thing I would recommend is to actually venture outside of the tourist zones, asking locals where they recommend to eat. I'll use Las Vegas as an example. Eating on the Strip, you'll find that the prices on the Strip differ significantly when you move towards the local areas more. And also, again, planning ahead. If you can, I would recommend breaking up your increments of payments so that you have only your transportation and food costs to worry about when you're actually on the trip, by having a travel fund ahead of time. And making sure you look out for those local happy hours, picking up groceries, mixing a little bit of eating out, and making some meals so that you can alleviate some of the costs.
No doubt. Well, you've given me the travel edge, so thank you so much for all of your tips today. That's Farah Turkot, money coach and podcaster, joining us live. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, still ahead, airlifting the injured out of Gaza. The CBC climbs aboard an evacuation flight, taking the desperately injured away from a war zone. That's coming up next.
I am pleased to introduce Bill 23.
The Manitoba government says it doesn't want convicted sex offenders to be able to hide behind a new identity, and are proposing a bill banning them from being able to legally change their name.
To keep Manitobans safe, we're ensuring that Manitoba does not become a haven for offenders to live in order to change their name.
But advocates who work with rehabilitated offenders call it a step back for restorative justice.
This would mean then that we want to label and stigmatize people, and we want to keep them in that place for the rest of their lives.
Community Justice Initiative says further punishing someone doesn't equate to holding them responsible and isn't the deterrent many think it is.
Real accountability is accepting responsibility for what you've done, coming to terms with the true impact of the harm that you've caused, and doing things in the interest of making that right.
There are more than 3,200 registered sex offenders in Manitoba. 2/3 are linked to child sex crimes. Approximately 150 people are added to the registry in Manitoba each year. In the past 3 years, only 4 have changed their name. They must provide a name, address, passport, and other details to RCMP yearly. Any changes must be reported within 7 days. Former names remain in the database.
They're already being held accountable in a way that we often don't for other types of crimes.
The Criminal Defense Lawyers Association of Manitoba questions the motive behind the bill.
What is the end goal? Is it to keep society safer, or is it to stigmatize people who have already paid their debt to society or prevent them from escaping that stigma? I don't know what that's helping.
Groups that work to reintegrate convicts into society say the best way to stop them from reoffending is keeping them connected.
One of the most important criteria for successful reintegration is to allow these individuals to, get re-involved with their families, get employment.
They say the province should be focusing on wraparound supports for people when they get out of jail instead of this proposed legislation.
I would rather know that the individual is out there being worked with, being supervised in a program like ours, rather than going underground and basically just disappearing.
Alberta and Saskatchewan are the only 2 provinces with similar legislation in place, although it's being proposed in Ontario and Newfoundland as well. Brittany Greenslade, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Welcome back to the nation's capital, and dignitaries and the public alike are paying their respects to former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney's family. Mulroney's Progressive Conservatives governed the country for nearly a decade, from 1984 to 1993. The CBC's Ashley Burke has more on the words of condolences.
A family and a country saying goodbye. Former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney lying in state near Parliament Hill. His wife Mila, daughter Caroline, and 3 sons, Nicholas, Ben, and Mark, greeting Governors General present and past.
Somber, sad, but inspired by a man who has left such an example for all of us to follow.
Michaëlle Jean shared what she said in her final goodbye.
That my heart is with him, that I said to him that he meant a lot to me in difficult times, when he would take the time to call me.
Jean said she admired Mulroney's sense of conviction.
We were together also, at the funeral of Nelson Mandela, and he told me the epic, fight it was, how he quarreled, with those who wouldn't do enough. He did with Margaret Thatcher, he did with Ronald Reagan, telling them that they had to do more because apartheid was a crime against humanity in South Africa.
Diplomats among those first to pay their respects and reflect on his legacy.
It's a great loss to both Canada and for us. Prime Minister played a historic role because he was the first leader in the Western world who recognized Ukraine's independence.
A steady stream of Canadians lined up too, some with personal connections.
When Mulroney was the Prime Minister, he came and met with our cabinet and met with our people. And he actually was, I think, the first Prime Minister to come out more boldly and recognize the Métis Nation used those exact words, the Métis Nation, and it touched every one of us.
Robin Averill showed the family a photo of one of his many performances singing for Mulrooney.
Oh, he was great. He used to love to get up on stage with me and sing. And this, of course, you all know what his favorite song was When Irish Eyes Are Smiling. When Irish Eyes Are Smiling.
The public visitation in Ottawa continues until Wednesday afternoon. Mulrooney will then lie in repose in Montreal before the state funeral. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, the House of Commons last night passed an NDP motion related to the war in Gaza. The language of the motion was changed right before voting took place. The original wording called for Canada to officially recognize Palestinian statehood. But the motion was debated late into the evening, with the Liberals prevailing with this amendment.
By replacing paragraph I with the following, quote, work with international partners to actively pursue the goal of a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East, including towards the establishment of the State of Palestine as part of a negotiated two-state solution.
The amended motion is non-binding and reflects some of the current Liberal policy. For instance, it makes reference to Hamas as a terrorist organization. Still, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is praising the motion. He says it forced the Liberals to stop transferring arms to the Israeli government and places sanctions on extremist settlers in the West Bank. Now, a Montreal MP says he's considering his future as a Liberal after last night's vote. Anthony Housefather says he was disturbed by the original motion put forward by the NDP's Heather McPherson. He says it created a false equivalency between the State of Israel and Hamas, which the Canadian government deems a terrorist organization. He says the Liberals could have just simply voted down the motion. And even though it was amended in the end, the debate made him feel isolated.
I truly felt last night that a line had been crossed when my party members got up and cheered and gave a standing ovation to Heather McPherson and the NDP. I started reflecting as to whether or not I belonged. And I will let you know further how I feel over the coming days. For the moment, I'm still there.
Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the military plans to push ahead with an incursion into Rafah. That's despite objections from key allies, including the U.S. And now Israel is facing fresh accusations from the United Nations. The UN has suggested Israel is using starvation as weapon of war. The CBC's Margaret Evans is in Jerusalem with the latest.
Jabalia, northern Gaza. This is the face of famine hammering at the gate. There is no room for dignity here. We came to line up, but they threw us out, says Musab al-Masri. There's not enough for the camp. One plate of flour isn't enough. People are already dying of starvation in northern Gaza, according to a new report by the UN's top food insecurity watchdog. They say famine could be declared at any moment unless there's an urgent change of course.
The extent of Israel's continued restrictions on the entry of aid into Gaza, together with the manner in which it continues to conduct hostilities, may amount to the use of starvation as a method of war, which is a war crime.
Israel blames Hamas and aid agencies themselves, but there's little evidence of Israel's recent pledge to flood Gaza with aid. The U.S. Secretary of State is also sounding the alarm.
100% of the population in Gaza is at severe levels of acute food insecurity. That's the first time an entire population has been so classified.
In Rafah, further south, people are bracing themselves for a looming Israeli ground invasion. Concerns over the fate of more than 1 million people sheltering there prompted the U.S. President Joe Biden to summon an Israeli delegation to Washington to discuss alternatives. The Israeli Prime Minister agreed, but he's also told Israeli legislators he's determined to move ahead with Rafah. We have an argument with the Americans regarding the need to enter Rafah, he says, not regarding the need to eliminate Hamas. There is already grief strong enough to pierce hearts in Rafah, another family in mourning after an Israeli airstrike overnight. The US, Europe, and the whole world support Israel with weapons, says Ibrahim Jargoon, displaced from Gaza City. They mock us and send 4 or 5 airdrops just to save face. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Well, the UN Food Agency says famine is imminent in parts of Gaza, so the supplies that are rolling in are crucial. But medical attention is also in short supply, and some patients need to be airlifted out for treatment in neighboring countries. CBC News chief correspondent Adrian Arsenault takes us on one of those evacuation flights. And a warning, this report contains scenes that some may find hard to watch.
Jasim, tell me when your team is ready here. We are calling the patient. Khalas. Bismillah.
On a tarmac in Egypt near Gaza, the ride out of the war zone has arrived. The worst they've endured starts to get better right here. Even if it all still hurts. 24 of the severely wounded and their families, so many of them kids, on their way to hospital in Qatar for advanced care. And the legs of 11-year-old Yahman Mahmoud Sharif with a fractured skull really needed. Everyone transferred right into the belly of a C-17, into what's effectively a flying emergency room for the 3-hour trip to Doha.
It's a little hard to process what they've all been through. Imagine to survive their injuries, to then be able to get out of Gaza, to then get on a list, to get on a flight like this one. There is relief in all of that, but also a lot of uncertainty and a lot of fear. What happens after they leave hospital? What will life be like? And crucially, will they ever be going back to Gaza?
They've left so many behind. Yahman's mom, Sabrine, says her husband was stopped at the border with Egypt.
Now she's alone with them, and his husband, he cannot enter here to the Egypt. They don't allow the man to cross the border. Only they want women only.
She could use some help because he's in trouble. The doctors say cranial bleeding is making him erratic, anxious. Not much, it seems, can console him.
And there is blood is inside. And now, you know, he don't know what he's doing.
So he has a skull fracture?
He was under
the rubble?
Yes.
Yahman was at home when an airstrike hit, collapsing the building on him. So agitated, they give him some light sedation. Fairly sure he'll have to head into surgery as soon as they land. Lots of concerned faces here, and maybe not just because of what's happened, but this whole experience. Imagine never having left Gaza, never having been on a plane before, and then being here. Dr. Jalal Al-Asai heads this operation. He recognizes the shaking and the noise here can sometimes be rough.
For them, it's like, you know, remind them about the situation there in Gaza because it's noisy and it causes a lot of noise. We had cases who, after they hear the takeoff sound of this one, collapsed because they remember the attacks during when they were in Gaza. So I believe they really remember what happened there when they hear the voice because it's very noisy.
No wonder some were terrified. And a few, like this woman who'd been able to sit at the beginning, ended up dizzy and unconscious. Hard to know what she endured before getting on this flight. While they work on her, her grandchild is in the arms of the Qatari Red Crescent. Part of caring is lightening the mood. It's Ramadan. We take off just as it's time to break the fast. So there's food and treats and a lot more smiles. One of the most remarkable smiles belongs to the very sunny 9-year-old Mahmoud Mohammed.
Mahmoud, what do you want to do when you grow up?
Did you catch what he said there? Sulhafi, he said. Journalist. He wants to be a journalist.
He wants to be like you, and he wants to be a football player also.
Oh.
So, yes.
Are you good at football?
هل انت شاطر في الكورة؟
كتير.
Yes.
كنت ألعبها.
Yes. Very good, excellent, perfect.
Who's your favorite player?
من لاعبك المفضل؟
محمد صلاح.
محمد صلاح.
Mahmoud's mom Noor are quick to offer pictures of better days.
This is his favorite food. مقلوبة. Yes, call this one مقلوبة. Yeah.
Yum. All that before the terrible December day when he was hit in an airstrike. Mahmoud lost both his arms.
His life become too much hard now.
In Doha, he'll get 2 prosthetics. He knows the plan and he's excited.
What will he do when he has his arms?
ويوم التركي في العيادة إن شاء الله. كيف تحس نفسك بتكون جميل وحلو يعني؟
كثير.
Yes, very.
بس ألعب كورة وأمسك كورة.
Yes, he can call the ball, he can play football, everything. Wow, ما شاء الله محمود.
Perfect.
If this team looks like they have it all in hand, it's because this is the 19th medical evacuation flight sponsored by Qatar. The Emir has vowed to care for 1,500 wounded Palestinians. Accommodation built for the World Cup is being offered to them. The exhaustion on this plane is worn on all these faces and not just those of the patients. This war takes a toll on everyone, medical staff included.
The world these people have just come from is one of chaos and mayhem and violence, and they may not realize it, but once they arrive in Doha, each person here has been assigned a medical, social, and psychological team to help them get through what's ahead.
As they near the end of the flight, the relief of the team is real. Everyone on board is stable. With the hugs come sprigs of basil, something fresh and fragrant. More toys, a bit more last-minute care, and a welcome to Qatar. It's kind, but imagine just how bewildering all of this must be.
And you can watch the CBC's full exclusive coverage with Adrienne Arsenault tonight on The National. Up next, many of us are enjoying the spring weather, but the earlier start to the season is putting some at risk, including our pollinators. We'll have more on that after the break.
Spring of 2020. COVID-19 had brought lockdowns to Ontario, and the pandemic was hitting some long-term care homes so hard that the military was called in to help. By the time the COVID vaccination campaign rolled out a year later, nearly 4,000 long-term care residents had died, and those deaths happened disproportionately in for-profit homes.
Massive, widespread, often preventable negligence that resulted in far too many unnecessary deaths and just trauma that will live with these families for the rest of their lives.
The claim of negligence will now be tested in court. The Ontario Superior Court has certified class action lawsuits against 6 of the major long-term care chains. They ran homes where many hundreds of residents died.
There are many homes in Ontario that didn't have a problem, and but these were the worst offenders from our perspective. We allege that their conduct fell far below any reasonable standard.
Teresa Pugliese is one of the victims whose story is driving the lawsuits. She died of COVID in May of 2020 after another resident in her shared room caught the virus.
So many people on that floor, on the 3rd floor of the Chartwell home, died, and we believed not proper steps were taken.
CBC News contacted all 6 chains facing the class action lawsuit for comment. Most declined because the case is still before the courts. A spokesperson for Chartwell said the claim does not have any merit and the company intends to vigorously defend itself. One of the lead lawyers representing families calls certification of the class action a big deal.
These are milestone events that you have only one shot at getting the case certified, And in this case, we were successful.
Any step closer to accountability and justice is a step in the right direction.
The court declined to greenlight separate class actions against municipally run and independent homes, saying the cases didn't meet the legal bar. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. A new report on air quality around the world shows Canada has taken a big step backwards. As the CBC's Anand Ram reports, last year's record-setting wildfire season is to blame.
Okay, so this is my emergency kit.
Peyton Knight is ready for most days.
This is my inhaler, this is my aero chamber, and this is my EpiPen.
Yeah. There's also an instruction card if someone found the 12-year-old unresponsive. But even for the ever-prepared Peyton, who lives with complex asthma and allergies, last year's wildfire smoke was too much.
It just reeked. When it's too smoky outside, it's like there's an elephant sitting on my chest.
Those sunless, choked skies, moving far beyond our borders, set the country behind in new global rankings by IQ Air, an air quality tech company. Of the most polluted countries last year, Canada did worse than the U.S., and double World Health Organization standards.
Previous years, Canada has the cleanest air quality in all of North America, and this year we saw just the exact opposite.
The report measured levels of PM 2.5, a pollutant that can spew out from wildfires, travel deep into lung tissue, and can cause breathing, heart, and cognitive problems.
There's no safe amount of particulate matter to inhale.
For some of the most vulnerable, like children, it's driving calls for upgrading air quality where they spend most of their time.
Schools as clean air shelters have actually been proposed in many countries because it keeps your child population healthy, and it also serves as this extra resource for communities.
Canada's warmest winter ever could set up a repeat of last year, and that may keep Peyton from an upcoming outdoor family wedding.
If it's too smoky, then she doesn't get to go. Something that everybody looks forward to, like going to their auntie's wedding, and being a part of that is now, because of our current climates, has turned into something kind of nerve-wracking.
Cold calculations as our warming climate feeds the conditions for longer and stronger wildfires. Anand Ram, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, today marks the official start of spring, but for many around the world, the warm weather came early this year. That may seem appealing on the surface, but as Susan Ormiston explains, the extreme temperatures could mean big trouble for the planet and some of its smallest creatures.
So they're keeping it at a little over 30 degrees.
If you're a honeybee, you like warmth.
And they're clustered together there to conserve the heat.
The wildly mild winter could be a good thing, but not when temperatures swing, hovering near 0 degrees this week in Guelph, way down from last week's spring spike over 20 degrees.
If it's really warm, they almost get tricked into building up their colony strength too early. And then when we get cold weather like this, it damages the colony. It's kind of like fruit trees going into bloom and then having cold weather.
Unusual early heat, ocean warmth still breaking records, Antarctic ice melting, all indicators, says the World's Meteorological Organization.
The year 2023 set new records for every single climate indicator.
On this, the first day of spring, 2024 is shaping up warmer, but
we cannot be completely certain about what will happen at the end of 2024.
Scientists do predict this year will join a 9-year streak of the world's warmest years. What's certain, it won't be a new normal.
We haven't cut our emissions anything like enough to stabilize temperatures at this new normal, right? So that means that it's going to keep on going.
Globally, the WMO is sending a red alert.
We should tackle this all together. Otherwise, we are all lost.
Even beekeepers are having to adapt.
In there, we can create a winter that's the same every year.
Helping weakened hives inside, no bright light.
Some of them are indoors, some of them are outdoors. This spreads the risk out.
To keep mortality down, 20% of its bees didn't survive the winter, possibly a parasite.
That's our number one problem, and it is exacerbated by climate change.
Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Guelph.
Our Darius Madavi is back with us, and Darius, certainly we saw that summer-like forecast the past week or so, and sounds like that might even be a foreshadowing of what's to come long-term.
Yes, that seems to be the case. Our long-term spring forecast from Environment Canada is suggesting that across Canada, and including here in BC, the most likely situation is that we will be warmer than usual. Now, there's a lot of leeway in there. It's not, this is only a probability, and also doesn't tell you how much warmer it will be, but it could be considerable, as we just saw. And this is really, as we heard, not the new normal. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. There's nothing stopping us from continuing to go. So things are changing so quickly, we won't have time to settle into a new normal. Things are just going to continue to change, which is what we're seeing this year with the snowpack. We have improved a little bit. This is the update from last Friday. So this is actually data from before our big hot weekend. So this could have dropped a little bit more, especially for lower elevation places like our local mountains here in Vancouver. So something to watch out for there as well. And if we take a look, again, we still have some of these new fires, some zombie fires, and some new fires throwing up smoke in many areas. And so this is our maximum smoke forecast for tomorrow. Still looking like that fire is throwing up some of that smoke, but it is still listed as under control by the BC Wildfire Service. So a little bit of good news there in terms of the fire not spreading, and we are going to see temperatures come down and some more rain there. So that should help as well as we have this cold front start to make its way down through the province. We're going to have those cooler temperatures start to head down through the cold front, mostly being limited to the eastern parts of the province, but we're also having that ridge of high pressure retreat and break down, meaning that we won't have anything locking in that heat and that sunshine, keeping us warm either. So even though our temperatures aren't going to drop as significantly as they are in some other parts of the province here on the coast and on the lower mainland, they are still going to start to come down back to where we would normally expect them for this time of year. In addition, we are going to see some precipitation, but this, as this model suggests, I switched to this one because it's a little bit more high res, and really, even though it doesn't show us quite as far, it gives you a better idea of how scattered these showers are going to be. It's not going to be a massive system rolling through, just some scattered showers, scattered flurries, depending on where you are, your elevation, and how chilly it's going to be. So really our conditions for tomorrow, not looking too bad at all. Still relatively calm. Even where we do see some precipitation, it will be calm. And even this is really just a scattered chance. And on southern BC, that precipitation isn't likely to come until Thursday. So a small chance on the coast of seeing a little bit of rain, but mostly it's going to be the end of this week and possibly the weekend.
Okay, well, we certainly had a good weekend. We can't complain if there's rain on the way for the next one. Thanks so much, Darius.
Thanks, Tanya.
After the break, going to the library to collect a sweet surprise. That's all the buzz. Why West Vancouver is loaning out bees. That's coming up next. Stay with us.
Hey fellow weather fanatics, grab your coats, hats, and mittens, because we're about to learn the cold hard facts about the polar vortex. As the name suggests, we're talking about the poles of our planet, and a phenomenon that happens at both. Today, we're gonna focus on the Arctic one. So what exactly is the polar vortex? To start, it's a big area of super cold, low pressure air high up in the atmosphere. It's called a vortex because it rotates in a circular direction, just like a tornado or a hurricane. But unlike a tornado or hurricane, the polar vortex is always there. Typically, it gets weaker in the summer and stronger in the winter. And sometimes, it gets a bit adventurous and takes a trip south, bringing freezing temperatures and chilly winds down to us. It doesn't drop by every year, but here's what makes it possible. This is the polar jet stream. It's a fast air current that keeps the polar vortex up north. Think of it like a boundary. The faster the jet stream goes, the straighter its winds travel. One reason the polar vortex shifts south is because of the weakened polar jet stream. When warm air from the oceans moves up, it slows this jet stream, which allows the vortex to come down, bringing frigid temperatures with it. It's like opening your freezer and letting the cold air out, but on a much bigger scale. All right, let's talk about what happens when the polar vortex pays us a visit. Here are some of its possible effects. Freezing temperatures. When the polar vortex moves south, it brings a blast of super cold air with it. This can mean 20 to 30 degrees colder than normal. Cold winds. The polar vortex doesn't just bring cold air. It also means strong winds as more air is drawn in from the north. Snowfall. The cold air from the polar vortex can lead to a more blizzard-like snowfall. Cold snaps from the polar vortex can affect daily life. That might mean dealing with icy roads, school closures, or even shut down outdoor activities. So, it's good to be prepared. How does climate change affect the polar vortex, you may wonder? Scientists are still trying to figure that out. But so far, they think a long trend of rising temperatures might mean more polar vortex winters for us. You can learn more about how to prepare for extreme cold weather by searching for it on cbckidsnews.ca.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Experience the choral spectacle of the season and celebrate Vancouver's thriving singing community at Corleone's annual singing festival, The Big Roar, April 13th. For tickets and information, visit corleone.org and never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
Welcome back. It's that time of year when the cameras come out as many of the city's trees burst into color. Yes, it's cherry blossom season.
Our Michelle Gomez hit the streets to ask Vancouverites what makes the delicate flowers so special to them.
With the warm weather, the cherry blossoms have come out in Vancouver, unofficially marking the start of spring. Today, we're asking Vancouverites what they think about it.
It's really nice. It's just like a way to tell the seasons are changing, right?
They look beautiful and they have a very nice aroma, actually, so I like the way they smell.
I love the color. I love it against the blue sky. And yeah, it's joyful.
I think it just adds a lot of color, especially after the rainy season, and just feels like excitement.
Well, I think everyone's just excited that spring's finally on the doorstep here, and yeah, excited for the outdoors and getting into summer.
It's nice to want to be outside, you know?
They just look fragile, floating up there with a blue background. I love that. When my mom was alive, I used to drive through the neighborhoods to show her. Yeah.
Oh, that's such a nice memory.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. She loved it. She was from Alberta, so they don't have that there, you know? Not the same that we do.
They're magnificent. Yeah.
What do you love about them?
Well, they're colorful and dynamic.
I love this timing. It's the best time in the year.
What do you think?
You like them? He likes to eat them.
It's like magic. I have pictures a lot. I never tired about take pictures. Yeah, I live here in the neighborhood. It's fantastic.
Beautiful, but as our director just said while we were watching that, until the rain comes down and makes a huge mess on the sidewalks and the streets. But hey, we'll enjoy them while they're here. A West Vancouver library is lending out more than just books. People can also take home honeybees.
Taryn Urquhart says she pioneered this program because libraries should be hubs of knowledge that connect the community and, in this case, benefit nature too.
So when I say you can borrow a bee, I mean, what does that mean? Am I literally borrowing a bee from the library? What am I doing here?
Yeah, you really are. Our mandate here is always to provide the best education. You come to a 1-hour lecture. I cover everything you absolutely need to know. And then you go home with a small house that my fine father and I have designed. It is really a 2-inch piece of drainage pipe. And you get everything you need inside. The little tubes that they live in will be included in the house along with some dormant cocoons.
A brave borrowing that would be. That is your 6 o'clock news for this Tuesday, March 19th. For news anytime, anywhere, download the free CBC News app. You can always find us online at cbc.ca/BC.
We will be back with your next local newscast at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.